morning, everyone. This is Lacy Johnson for the Lacy Johnson Podcast. I am very excited this morning to have and I consider a special guest, Mr. Dave Rubin, who has his own podcast, and well, he's well known. So good morning, Dave. Thanks for being our guest this morning.
Thanks. It's good to be with you. You know, we connected for 10 seconds before we started this thing right now, and we compared and contrasted our situations. You're in cloudy Minnesota with Ilhan Omar, and I'm in sunny Miami with Ron DeSantis. I got a major advantage in this interview.
Yes, you do. In fact, you're making me jealous, and you're going to force me to cash in a few of my bonus points and mileage to just fly down to Florida sometime this week. But yeah, I'm very envious of you in that situation. So let's start a little bit about you and yourself. I think we have a lot in common. Like you, I was at one time a liberal.
Oh, yeah.
And the more I read and the more I thought and the more knowledge I had, it was easy for me to become a conservative. As a matter of fact, when I look back on it, I realized I was raised a conservative. Like a lot of African Americans, we're conservative, really. I don't know why we vote liberal. And so I realized that too. But you had another thing is my libertarian views. So why don't you tell us just briefly about your journey from liberalism to conservatism and libertarianism?
Sure. Well, I am the ripe old age of 45. I was born in Brooklyn in 1976 when it was still old school Brooklyn, before it was hipster barbecue Brooklyn. Lived in Brooklyn for a couple of years, and then my dad worked hard enough and we started moving towards middle class, and my dad got us out to Long Island, which that was sort of the dream if you lived in the tri-state area, you know, the New York, New Jersey area. The dream, of course, was to get out of the boroughs, New York City, Manhattan, Queens, etc., and, you know, hopefully make enough money so you could get a little plot of land and a house and everything else and move out to either Long Island or the Jersey suburbs, etc., etc. And I had a very decent upbringing. And it's funny because, you know, the word, as you know, Lacy, the word liberalism has been so mangled and beaten and is in such bad shape that when you say liberalism of 2022, people think of Ilhan Omar. They think of AOC. They think of Bernie. And actually, these are the most illiberal people. The true liberal person, perhaps the liberal that maybe you were, say, 10 years ago, or that I was 10 years ago, the liberal was the JFK liberal. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. When I was growing up, the mayor of New York City was Ed Koch. He was an old school liberal. We had a great senator in New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He was an old school liberal. Now, we don't really have those liberals anymore. There's certainly none of them in politics. We have a couple that exist culturally. I would say Bill Maher is kind of an old school liberal. He mostly just says conservative things 2 years later. That's what liberalism has kind of become. So now when he says same things, it's like, oh, well, that's what all the conservatives were saying 2 years ago. But that was the sort of liberalism that I came from. So I grew up in a solidly middle-class family. One of the things that I wrote about in my first book that I'm very proud of from my family roots, and it's interesting that you said that so many Black people are actually conservatives kind of, but they don't know it. I actually think that has also happened within the Jewish community, that you have a group of people that have an ethnic background, a shared history, in many ways, in both the Black and Jewish community, a really brutal histories, you know, that in this country and in other countries wasn't always the greatest history, but have survived and often thrived. But then something happened, and there are different reasons for it, I would say, within the Black community and the Jewish community and other minority communities as well, that caused a whole bunch of people to start thinking that leftism was their religion rather than some of the stuff that they had learned or that their parents knew or that either that their religion taught them or their ethnic traditions taught them, et cetera, et cetera. So I grew up in a very sort of liberal in the good sense of it family where at all our holidays, whether it was Thanksgiving or a religious holiday, everybody was screaming and yelling and arguing about everything. I mean, abortion and foreign policy and this, that. And then guess what? Every time, and I really mean this, every time dessert would be served, we were good to go. And then we just pick it up at the next holiday. And that actually is a very liberal belief that, oh, people are going to think different things than you. You're going to battle it out. And then, you know, you realize that, hey, maybe family is more important than that. Maybe community is more important than that. So I was a liberal in that sense. And then, you know, post-college, I got involved with the Young Turks Network, which is a far left, you know, progressive YouTube channel. And what I started thinking, and I think this is what a lot of young people think, and it's why progressivism has taken off, is that progressives, they were always screaming, everybody's a racist, everybody's a homophobe, everybody's a bigot. And they seemed like liberals on steroids. It seemed really powerful because they were so angry all the time and banging their hands that everybody else was a bad guy. It became very cult-like, but there's something very appealing to that, which is why it works with young people. And I have to admit, I got sucked into that thing. I really did. And then it was a few key moments in my life while doing my show that woke me up. A couple of them that are very famous. I had a very famous sit down with Larry Elder, who is now a good friend of mine, who I did not know at the time, conservative radio talk show host who happens to be black. And we started talking about systemic racism. And Larry, I love him. He just beat me senseless with facts. And instead of doing what usually liberals do, which is call him a racist or something, or call him a white supremacist, I took the hit and I started reading. And I started reading books by people like Thomas Sowell. And then I eventually interviewed Thomas Sowell. And then I started reading more libertarian economic books. I started talking to other scary people like Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro and Glenn Beck, people that I thought were bigots and all these mean people. And I found them to be good, decent people. So, you know, guys like us, you know, we may not be, you know, sort of what they traditionally think of as conservative, but that's the beauty of conservatism. It is a freaking wide tent if you're really willing to look at it and see that.
Yes, and you bring up so many things that I could dive into. Patrick Moynihan, Ed Koch. I just remember the Moynihan report and what it predicted, and we just have thrown that aside. And also just how the evolution into conservatism happened. And to be honest with you, it was easy for me to be a liberal when the national debt was like $4 billion rather than than 30 trillion. When I was growing up during the civil rights movement, it was all based on the Constitution and things like that versus people who want to throw it out the window now. And I think, too, there's just a transition into the field of being progressive. And when they just don't know when to stop, in other words. So
that's it right there. Liberalism, the liberalism that you grew up with, the liberalism of Martin Luther King Jr., the liberalism of all of the true social justice movements in this country, meaning the right for women to vote, the right for black people to vote, to end slavery, for all of the things that made people equal, that's liberalism. Liberalism is an equal playing field. And then we can argue about, you know, social versus cultural norms versus political norms and all of those things. But you're right, and this is the key part of liberalism. And this was a very hard pill, I would say, for me to swallow. Liberals, unfortunately, if you took the set of ideas that liberals care about and you looked at it in a hierarchy, liberals basically put tolerance at the highest possible piece in that hierarchy. The problem with that, of course, is if tolerance is your most important feature of your worldview, you will become tolerant of anything. You will become tolerant of intolerance. This is why the most intolerant people in our society today are the progressives, because they have allowed everything in, and anyone who does not bow to them thus must be a bigot and a racist and a homophobe and everything else. It's why someone like in your home district, Ilhan Omar, I would put her at the high list of the most intolerant, anti-American public people that we have in this country, a hypocrite, and I would argue a bigot, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But she does it under the guise of I'm a progressive, tolerant person. It simply isn't true. And the beauty is, for guys like us, is we don't have to work that hard to show it, actually. You really just have to, you know, peel off, I would say, a very thin veneer and then listen to them. And if you listen to them, you will realize very quickly that they actually are the biggest.
Yeah, I just remember Elon Musk within the last couple of weeks said he used to vote Democrat because of kindness. And I was talking to one of my conservative friends just this morning that somehow we need to take our message and kind of wrap it in a package of kindness some type of way, because a lot of times, if you're like me, the Constitution, it's a principal document. That's what I look at. But my liberal friends, they really either don't know the Constitution or care about it. They just care about doing kind acts for people without a set of principle in which to operate. So that's the way I see a lot of times liberals are just off the rail, off the track. And I think that you bring some very good points there.
Well, I would also say that it's not just doing kind things, it's faux kind things, because it's things that you think are kind that actually are not kind. So, for example, I mean, you know this, it's like, if you look at the welfare state, it's the idea of the welfare state is to be kind to people, help the people who need it most. And then if you do any research on the effects of the welfare state and food stamps and subsidized housing and all of those things, and this is where anyone should read, you don't have to take it from me, read any of Thomas Sowell's research for the last 40 years. Read the very first paper that he wrote, which is when he was working for the government. And he started doing research on the welfare state, and he brought the papers to the people in the department. And he said, guys, actually we're trapping people in welfare. And everyone says to him, no, we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that, because the government needs the machine to keep going, right? So it's faux helping people. It makes you, what do? We give taxes to poor people because we love poor people. But then if you actually look at it, you go, well, actually, what that does is cause intergenerational economic depression. It keeps people in subsidized housing. One of the stories that I go into in my most recent book is that my sister was living in a nice building on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, nice part of Manhattan. And she was working full-time. Her husband was working full-time, 2 kids. They're in a 1-bedroom apartment that they converted to a 2-bedroom. So they didn't even have a window in the living room, right? So this is not it's a nice building, but this is no luxurious lifestyle. For this 1-bedroom apartment, they were paying $5,000 a month. This is about 2 years ago, $5,000 a month. Half the building was rent subsidized and rent stabilized. So now you've got all of these people that have the same exact apartment as them. They happen to be black. This has nothing to do with their skin color. This is the nature of what the welfare state does. And they are in the same exact apartment, and they're paying, say, $600. What happens is, well, okay, now you have kids. Your kids go, well, wait a minute, and now it's 20 years later. The kids are now in this apartment, $600, and you're going, man, if I get off the government dole, I'm going to have to leave this apartment. I'm going to have to get a second job. I'm going to have to move further out of the city and everything else. So this is where it's like, man, if you just look at the obvious results of these things, you're punishing a certain set of people who have to pay more for something, and then you're trapping people. It's human nature. It has nothing to do with skin color. Those could be Hispanic people, those could be Asian people, they could be white people. If you say to somebody, hey, I will give you something that is worth $5,000 for $600, congratulations, you're going to take it.
They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, and that's the way I feel about a lot of the liberal policies, just like you do. In fact, one of the reasons I got into politics because I'm sitting at home and I'm hearing all these solutions, quote unquote, liberal solutions to issues, and I just totally disagree with them. And I'm like, it'll never solve it. And you mentioned a couple of things, affordable housing. I mean, and once again, I try to approach these issues like I'm talking to my kids or someone I really love. You need to earn your way into $100,000 apartment building unit. It should not be given to you. In fact, I'm against giving, generally speaking. I mean, I know we have short-term needs, giving anything to healthy people mentally and physically when they can earn it themselves. And I think something like public housing is a good example. It's just a bad policy. They mean well. And these things have actually hurt the African-American community. Another pet peeve, and I got a whole list of them because none of their policies make sense to me, Dave. Even minimum wage. I tell people, if my son comes to me and say, Dad, I can't afford to live off the money I'm making now, the last thing I would tell him, just go ahead and make your boss give you more money. I would tell him, nah, find out where the good paying jobs are and let's work together to help you get that. And that's really when you're really helping each other. And if you think about it, a lot of things they could accuse conservative of racism, sexism. If you really dive deep into them, they're the real racists and sexists and bigots because, once again, I'm just tired of what liberal policies have done to the black community. I'm just sick of it. I just think it's not coincidental that 40, 50 years of liberal policy in our community just keep getting worse. I don't think those things are coincidental.
Of course, you're right. And the simple truth is, if they worked, then would the situation be as it is? I mean, that's the simple answer. So, it's funny because you said that you do call them racists and bigots now, and it took me a long time to do that because I didn't want to do the same thing that they were always doing to us, right? And yet in the last, I don't know, year and a half or so, I have started doing it because it doesn't mean that all of them are, right? I don't think that the average 21-year-old who gets, unfortunately, a bad education at a liberal arts school and comes out thinking that the government automatically does good, I don't think that they're a bigot or racist. I think they're confused and the machine has taught them bad ideas. However, I do think, actually, that Nancy Pelosi is a bigot and a racist. I really do believe that. There is simply no way, after her 800 years in public service, which she became, she's worth about $100 million. Incredible coincidence, right? There is simply no way that she has not realized that her policies in San Francisco have demolished San Francisco, have intentionally created a situation that the inner city has been destroyed. And by the way, it's not just her. I mean, we can go through every mayor. Look what David Dinkins did in New York City. Now, David Dinkins happens to be black, so I don't think it has anything to do with his skin color that he was making bad decisions. It was his ideology, obviously, that was making bad decisions. But David Dinkins destroyed New York City, and then who fixed it? Well, it was a very scary guy by the name of Rudy Giuliani who cleaned up the entire city. And then New York City had an incredible 20 years until progressive Bill de Blasio comes in, and now he wrecked it. And then Eric Adams has now come in. And Eric Adams, a lot of people thought he was going to be a moderate, and it's very obvious he's going to, govern as a far lefty as well. So to me, these people who are in the positions of power, I am over the road to hell is paved with good intentions with them. If at this point you do not realize what defunding the police does, I mean, that moment in your city when Ilhan Omar, after 2 years of defund the police, when then she had that press conference and she blamed the police for not doing their job when she saw crime go up, it's like, no, lady, you do not get away with that. You caused this problem, and that needs to be exposed.
So you make a good point there to separate racist policies and results from the people, and especially everyday people. Our leaders know better. I agree with you there. There's no good intention on their part. You brought up a couple of other good things, but let's just a couple quick issues here I want to get your take on. First of all, this debate about the Second Amendment in light of the school shootings in Texas. I got some fundamental opinions and conclusions about that. I was just wondering, where do you stand on that issue and the whole idea of we need more gun controls, and that's the only solution a lot of time that's proposed by the liberal, leftist, progressive side. What do you think is going on there, Dave?
I don't think you'll find this as much of a surprise, but of course I don't think that's the answer. I am a Second Amendment defender. I'm a staunch defender. I would say I am more of a staunch defender of the Second Amendment now in my life than at any other time. The simple fact is we have a mental health problem. We have a spirituality problem. We have a problem related to social media and politics and divisiveness. Because, Lacy, you and I know this. If we had an AR-15 sitting in front of us, neither one of us are walking into a temple or a church or a mosque or a school and shooting everybody. I don't know if you saw the clip last week on Joy Reid's show. And Joy Reid is just off the charts, bananas. But she opened her show. She opened her show 2 or 3 days after the Uvalde shooting, saying that this 18-year-old kid, whose name I refuse to say because I don't want to give him any extra credit on this, she said he had no mental health issues. That is actually psychotic. She has a mental health issue. If you think that an 18-year-old can take a gun, mow down 20 kids and some teachers, and that is not the result of a mental health problem, it is only the problem of the weapon, then you have a mental health problem. I don't even know what else to say to her. So I'm a staunch defender of the Second Amendment. I'll also tell you this, that although I live in Florida now, I lived in California for most of COVID. I only moved here 2 years ago. About 6 months ago. but for the 2 years of COVID, I was in California. And, the riots were going right by my house. And I realized as they're calling to defund the police and riots are going by my house, I needed to defend myself. So I never had guns until these last 2 years. And now I do. And I feel better knowing that I can defend myself. However, I live in Florida where we support the police. And, you probably don't even need them as much here, at least for now. And that's the beauty of defending good governance and also taking some responsibility for yourself.
I think you hit on some very key points there, and we're in sync on that. I especially like the point about our society and us losing our moral compass. I'm from a background where everybody had guns. As a matter of fact, I was telling someone, I was talking to the deacon of my church when I was living there a few weeks ago, and he indicated he had 30 guns in his house. And I tell people, we grew up in an arena of faith, and we went to church and we listened to the 10 Commandments. That's what gave us a moral compass. So we didn't care how many guns we had. The 10 Commandments taught us, thou shalt not kill, and that's what we did. We didn't steal, we didn't lie. And so I think that moral compass we've lost. Not only that, though, we're being pushed even further to in an immoral direction. And so I think that's part of it. I think if we just rebuild the families. My dad and mom determined my view of the world and what I did. And they were just very strong and upright. And that's what I was. And they didn't care what the world was doing and how the world was like. They set a certain set of moral behaviors for me that I never diverted from. So you're bringing up some very key points there. Let's talk about a little bit about the abortion issue in the recent leak. And that's trouble. I mean, if you're like me, these people they'll do anything to get their way, it seems like. What do you think about that whole leak? It was just incredible. And I can't believe that we are not more outraged by that.
Yeah, so on the leak itself, well, first off, I agree with you that there is no line these people will not cross. They do not like the United States of America. Again, I only keep bringing up Ilhan because you're in her area over there. Well, it's not her area. You're in your area over there. She's temporarily doing some stuff over there. But I fundamentally do not think she likes the United States. She has made it clear she thinks this place is systemically racist, all of this stuff. And this goes for all of the squad and most of the progressives. I believe that when someone tells you something, you should believe them. You should take people for their word. So when they tell you that this, that the United States was founded on racism and the 1619 Project and all of these crazy things, I believe them. So there is no line they would not cross. They believe the ends justify the means. So the fact that now we're, 5 weeks off of this leak already, and we're barely talking about abortion anymore because now we're talking about guns, and tomorrow we'll be talking about monkeypox, and the machine just kind of keeps on rolling. I mean, look, the fact that, most likely a law clerk within one of the 9 justices leaked this thing, and I think they each have 4 top clerks, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, there's a limited amount of people that would have had access to the brief. They will figure out who it is. But the fact that that should have been the story, not necessarily what happened after. We could talk about abortion, and if you want to talk about states' rights and all of that stuff, of course we can do that. But the simple fact that somebody decided to assault the court in the most twisted, perverse way, to assault the legitimacy of the court, that is by design. That is not a bug, it is a feature, because they want the court to be assaulted. So the leak is an extraordinary escalation of the craziness. As for the decision itself, I mean, look, I believe in federalism. There is no constitutional right to an abortion. There simply is not. You can be pro-choice and understand that the decision of Roe v. Wade did not make sense, because you can personally be pro-choice in your own belief system, let's say, or want a certain amount of weeks for a state. But understand that does not mean that the federal government had the right to tell all of the states what to do. That's in direct conflict with state rights versus the federal government. So, look, I consider myself to some degree begrudgingly pro-choice. I do not deny that the sperm meets the egg. That is a life. That is obviously the beginning of life. There's just no question about it. It has to start somewhere. I believe in a country of 350 million people with all the religious views that we have, all of the cultural views that we have, all of those things, that it's an unfortunate thing, and you would want it to be safe and rare, but that you need a few weeks, I would say, to where there's some ability to make a decision for yourself, regardless of what our own personal views might be, let's say. That would be my position. I think that's actually what most people's position is, because most people would say, if you were totally pro-life, you would say, I would not have an abortion. I would hope that most people would not. And hopefully you would also maybe do some charity work and help a woman out if she was pregnant and guide them in a different way. Hopefully you could do some personal responsibility stuff there. But I think that most people do understand if you completely outlaw abortion altogether, it's not going to actually stop abortion. It's going to make abortion much more dangerous. Poor people are going to have a much harder time, but I assure you, rich people will still get abortions. There will be all sorts of crazy inconsistencies that will exist. It also, because you mentioned libertarianism before, the idea that the government is jumping in here, I obviously don't love that. The contrary part to that is, of course, government is supposed to defend things such as life. So there's all of these things that are rich things to talk about that unfortunately we don't do. I mean, basically, the left says that the right hates women and the right says that the left hates babies, and then we're kind of left to it at that. But I'll just say one other thing on this, which I think is super interesting and I wish the media would have covered, which is that right before the leak, Florida, which is now a very firmly red state, led by Ron DeSantis, who is, to me, the leader of the Republicans right now, right? And really, in many ways, he's kind of the president of the United States at some level, at least the free states. Florida, right before the leak, passed a 15-week ban on abortion. 15 weeks is 3.5 months. Now, Ron DeSantis is pro-life, so I have no doubt that in his own mind, he wished it could have been earlier than that. 3.5 months is pretty deep into a pregnancy. But Florida passed that, and most people had no idea that it passed. And you know why? Because most people realized that is the compromise. That is you may not like it, but that is the compromise. And it passed in a red state. So the point is that red states and conservatives, they already are compromising. The average person in Texas may not want abortion. They did a 6-week thing. Florida did 15. Cali's going to have 8 months. These are this is what Dennis Prager always describes as the experiment of America. We can watch it happen in all of these different places and we can see the results.
I like all the things you're saying there because I respect federalism. I can't imagine us ever making abortion illegal all through the United States. It's going to be on a state-by-state level. And just as an aside, ideally, we'll have 25 states where it's legal and 25 where it's illegal, and all the leftists and progressive will move to those states. That's where we're headed anyway. So let's end on this, and you've been touching on a lot of great subjects. Given that the media, our educational system, our pop culture, big tech, social media, all the places where our citizens get their information from are progressive, quote unquote, institutions. Where is the hope for conservatives that we'll be able to stop this slide into a leftist, Marxist kind of country? How do we turn that back? It seems like they have a lot of infrastructure in place. Yeah, and it seems like we as conservatives don't appreciate they have a lot of infrastructure in place. So I'm going to give you the $64,000 question, Dave. How do we deal with that infrastructure?
Well, look, they have infrastructure. They have the levers of power. They are controlling virtually all of the systems that we are able to communicate on, right? There is no doubt. Does Twitter have a leftist or a conservative bias? Obviously leftist. Does Facebook have a leftist or conservative bias? Obviously, okay, so we know all that, right? So I'll give you the more spiritual answer. How about this? Instead of I can give you a technical one, but I like the spiritual one more. The spiritual one is that humans have lived through horrific things. The story of humanity is individual people standing up to the machine. It is David versus Goliath. It is the institutional power versus the individual person. This is the story, right? This is the story. And if you really understand that, and you really believe in the human mind and your capacity to reason and understand the world, and as you said that you would say to your son, instead of, oh, demand that you get more money, find a better job, and then maybe I can help you along the way. If you have a good community around you, a good family around you, then all of these things that seem so huge that are above us, and they are, and it's not to diminish their power. Goliath was a big dude. David took a slingshot and a rock and he took him out, right? So you can either believe that story literally or you can believe it metaphorically. It does not matter, actually. If you believe that the little guy can beat the big guy, if you believe that against all odds, goodness can happen, if you believe anything of the stories that we all grew up on, whether you love Lord of the Rings or you love Star Wars or whatever your lore is, if you believe any of that, then we have a chance. We have a chance. And it may not mean that we're ever going to get control of Twitter or that Twitter is going to ever treat us all fairly. That may not be it. But you know what? These things also don't exist forever, right? The Roman Empire existed for a long time. The Egyptian pharaohs existed for a long time. They don't exist anymore. Kodak was vital to America. Microsoft, Enron, these things, they feel like they're ubiquitous and they can never go anywhere. And then one day they're gone. And I think that, although I can give you some technical ways that we can also escape, I don't even think that's that important. I think that the idea that we can win, that's one of the things they're trying to steal from us at the moment. They want us to be so depressed by inflation and the economy and COVID and monkeypox and supply chain and everything else that you forget, man, you got a chance. And if you realize that, you're unstoppable.
Well, we've taken up just about all the time allotted for me this morning, Dave. But I love that answer, by the way. I tell a lot of people, given what they have in place and what's going on, it would be easy to lose hope if you didn't have a spiritual perspective on what's going on. So I love that answer, perfect answer, because I think we are in a spiritual battle. And I think either you think you're spiritually strong or you're not. And I think we got a lot of people who are spiritually strong on our side. And even though I tell people sometimes it feel like we're in the Alamo, and the people and the other side is at the gate, it is look kind of bleak. But I agree with you. If we take a spirit.
Hey, as Han Solo said, there's always a way to blow up a Death Star.
That's correct. So let's go out. I appreciate everything. Let's go out and let's blow up some Death Stars and let's win our country back. Let's make it positive. And, most importantly, Dave, I got into this arena, even the political arena, to just make a lot of people's lives better. And there's a lot of people's lives out here who are suffering unnecessarily because our leadership have these crazy leftist idea about how you go about to help people. And really what they're doing is that they're harming the people in their communities with a lot of these policies. So we want to go out and empower people. We want to go out and we want to have some type of moral compass that we're living towards. We want to have principles that we're basing things on. And we don't want to have an attitude that the ends justify the means like McCarthy did back in the old search for communist days. In fact, I think it's rather ironic that it was the leftists who were victim back in those days, and they're turning it around and victimizing other people, conservative, with their cancel culture and everything else. So you have been very, very great and wonderful. Do you have anything coming up, Dave, that you'd like to share with my audience here? Any plans for the future? Any great things that we can be looking for besides having on great guests on your podcast?
Well, unfortunately, my friend, I don't plan on being in Minnesota anytime soon, but if you and your audience want to come down to the free state of Florida, to Miami on July 14th, I just finished up my book tour. We did our last show in Orlando with Governor DeSantis a couple of days ago, but we decided to add one more show in my new hometown. So July 14th, I'll be at the Miami Improv, and people can get tickets at daverubin.com/events.
Thank you very much. I'll try to make it down there for that. Thank you for all your insight. I think we're synced up on a lot of ideas and approaches, and just keep up the great work because we're in a spiritual battle here, and we need spiritual warriors like you, and may I say, like me. And so thank you very much, Dave, and I hope to be in touch with you soon and follow up.
Likewise, my friend, and hopefully we get to do this in person one of these days.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.